Okay, shall we start? Yeah. Ready? So, are there any questions about what we have covered so far? Does anyone want to say anything? Is everyone? Lai? Yeah, okay, please.
Good morning, Ajahn. Just now that sutta about the not to add or not to minus the original words of the Buddha.
Yeah.
But for the 2,000 old years, there's so many commentaries. So does it actually attribute? I mean, not does it means that it is already sort of against the sutta, adding and minusing?
Okay, so all the commentaries and all the things that have been added over the years, is this adding to the suttas? And I think it depends on how you use those commentaries. Yeah, you can use them wisely or you can use them stupidly. Use them wisely, that's what I say. So how do you use them wisely? And the way you use them wisely is that sometimes the suttas are not necessarily obvious. Sometimes it's very easy to understand. You read, you understand straight away. Yeah, right speech, don't say divisive speech, say speech that goes to the heart. Everybody understands that straight away. You know what it means. But sometimes you get dependent origination. You get 12 things. Think, jeepers, what is this all about? You have no idea what it means. Yeah, avidya leads to sankharas. If you ask a fellow, if you go down on the street and ask somebody, what does avidya lead to sankhara means, and they would think you're crazy or something, yeah, because it's very hard to understand. And then you need some commentary to make sense out of these things. Actually, you may not need a commentary. If you know the suttas really well, you know how to cross-reference, you can actually find it out from the suttas. But then in those cases, it can be handy to have a commentary. That's why I'm here. I'm a commentator, yeah. That's what I am. I comment on the sutta. That's kind of my job as a monastic. So you use the commentaries to help you understand the suttas, but you don't allow the commentaries to get a life of their own, where the commentary kind of becomes the suttas, and that becomes what you read, and you don't worry so much about the suttas. And this is often what happens when people study the Abhidhamma too much, and that becomes the main Dhamma. The suttas become secondary. They study Visuddhimagga becomes it, and the suttas become secondary. That is when the problem arises. Yeah. Okay. Good. So, yes, please. Good morning. Yeah.
There's this mention of chunda. May I know is a word or a person?
Is it a person or a?
Or just a word?
Well, it's a person.
So is it connected to Uddaka Ramaputta?
Chunda was one of the disciples of the Buddha. Mahachunda, I think he was a brother of Sariputta, actually, one of Sariputta, and he is just there because he is like the person who is in the Buddha's presence, or the Buddha's talking to him.
Because I saw this word quite a number of times in his while reading about Buddha's book.
Okay.
So I thought he is connected to Uddaka Ramaputta.
Yeah, no, he's not actually. No, he's got nothing to do with it. He's actually a disciple. He's one of the monks. He's a disciple of the Buddha. Yeah.
So it's a different person.
Different person, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And another question, the four foundations and all that, will you cover that later?
But, all that will come in the sutta on the next weekend, the 37 Bodhipakkhadhammas. That's all about that for 3 days solid, yeah? Okay. So just about that, right. Because it is a very broad topic and it needs to be gone into detail. So if I say about it now, it will be very superficial. But essentially, what I can say about it is that it really comes down to the Noble Eightfold Path, yeah? So it all kind of is summarized into the Noble Eightfold Path in a sense.
Because I've read almost all of it, but I do not understand the 5 mental power. What is it?
Yeah. So we will do. Are you going to come for the last next weekend as well? Okay, good. So you'll get it all then. Yeah. You're one of the wise ones. That's good. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn, for explaining so much for the entire morning. But I still don't get it. What does that mean? He sees but does not see.
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
Well, what it means that he does not see anything that is additional. He sees the Dhamma, he sees the suttas, he knows what is there. That's what he sees. But he doesn't see anything that can be added or subtracted. That is what he does not see here. Yeah, so he sees the suttas, these are the suttas, but he does not see anything that can be added or deducted. That's what he does not see. Yeah, that's the kind of the idea there. So it is about a spiritual matter rather than a razor blade, which is kind of the first one thought. Yeah, so this is what we're going to do. The rest of it, we're going to be seeing. We're going to be seeing just the suttas and try to add as little as possible. So if I add something too much, then you say, "Oh, cannot see. I don't want to see that. Don't want to hear about that. I don't want to know about that." Something like that. Yeah. Okay. So just what I should say before I move on is these 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas that I just listed out, where can they be found in the suttas? And really, this is when we talk about the four main Nikayas of Buddhism, the long discourse, the middle-length discourses, the connected discourses, and the numerical discourses. This is what we mean. Yeah, they are really about the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas. So again, we know that because this is the group of teachings that are the earliest part of Buddhism that go all the way back to the Buddha himself, the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas. So that is where we should need to look. So if you want to find out the teachings of the Buddha, that is actually what you look at. So when we are now going to start looking at the life of the Buddha, this is kind of the next thing coming up over the today and the next couple of days. Then for me, the life of the Buddha is to be found within those suttas. That is where I always look for the life of the Buddha. It is not found kind of elsewhere. And this is quite interesting because most people, when you hear about the life of the Buddha, most of the things that people think they know about the life of the Buddha actually is not found in the suttas. A lot of it is found in later commentaries. It is found in a place called the Jataka Nidana, which is like the origin or the kind of the preamble to the Jataka stories. It is found there, and it talks about the life of the Buddha in great detail. But most of those details are not actually found in the suttas. And some of those details are actually in contradiction to the suttas. Yeah, and I will point some of those out as we go along, because once there is a contradiction there, then that is where you may have a detrimental effect. Yeah, because it may actually give a wrong understanding of the life of the Buddha, and then that has an effect for how we regard the Buddha in the present day. And this is kind of is all quite can be quite important and significant. So a lot of the Buddhism or the story of the Buddha that we know today is really legendary. It's mythology. It is things that were written down a long time after the Buddha that the Buddha himself never actually expressed. Yeah, and if things are mythology and legend, sometimes that's nice. A little bit of legend, a little bit of storytelling is kind of okay. But sometimes the legend and the storytelling can go too far, and they can actually detract from our understanding of the Buddha. And one of the things that you find with the later legends and stories, they become more and more magnificent and more marvelous, more and more supernormal powers, more and more kind of wealth, and everything is really splendid, and everything is really over the top, and it has no relation to the facts that we know about ancient India. In ancient India, everything was quite small. Society, we know that from the archaeological excavations, for example, in the north of India, things were very small scale. And then when you read in this later mythology that some of the cities were enormous and massive and whatever, you know that there's something which doesn't fit, something which isn't quite right. And that is why coming back to the suttas, when we want to understand the life of the Buddha, actually matters a lot. And one of the things about the life of the Buddha, there's a couple of reasons why I want to focus on this, and one of the reasons is that the Buddha himself, he talks about the Buddha Nusati. Yeah, the Buddha Nusati is the recollection of the qualities of the Buddha, and the Buddha has a formula for how we're supposed to recollect the Buddha. And this, I'm sure you Do you chant this here at the BGF? The itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho vijja charana sampanno sugato loka vidu anuttaro purisa dhammasarati satta deva manusanang. Yeah, this is the standard recollection of the Buddha, and this is the recollection that the Buddha himself recommends that we should use when we think of his life. Yeah, and that is what we should come back to, and that is really the essence of what the Buddha is about. And so it actually matters how we regard the Buddha. And so when we recall the Buddha, the point of that is supposed to inspire us. It's supposed to kind of give us some kind of uplift. And sometimes when we think about the Buddha in the right way, it becomes a little bit too much. It doesn't really perhaps inspire us quite in the right way. It becomes too supernatural, too far away. Instead of being a human being who has taken the human potential, to the highest level, it becomes more like a god. It becomes more like a supernormal phenomenon, something we cannot really relate to anymore. But the point is, of course, in the suttas, is that what you see is you see the Buddha as a human being. He's essentially the same as everyone else in this world, but he does take that human potential to the highest possible level, and that is what makes the Buddha unique. And this is so important because one of the things that the Buddha does in the suttas, he talks about his own striving for enlightenment. He talks about how he had defilements. He talks about his own wrong view when he started out. Yeah. So once you start to see the Buddha in that way, you see that he was he was struggling with exactly the same problems that all the rest of us have. He was no different from the rest of us. And so when the Buddha teaches us from his own life story what he is doing, the whole point of that, of course, is to encourage us and say, this is how I practice. You too should be practicing in the same way. Yeah, and that only really works if the Buddha is one of us, if the Buddha is a human being like the rest of us. If the Buddha is some kind of different being, if he is a god or a cosmic principle, I don't know what, then of course it doesn't work anymore. You don't have that connection to the Buddha that we really should have to enable this path to be meaningful to us. But it's precisely because that he is a human being that he can teach us, he understands our problems, and we can relate to his own practice. So as a starting point, I want to just very briefly discuss that recollection of the Buddha. I should have added that as a sutta in here. I didn't actually add it. Oh, you have? Oh, okay. I don't need it. Bobby, that's okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at this recollection of the Buddha, because it creates a kind of background for the rest of how we look at how we're supposed to think about the story of the Buddha and his awakening and all of that. So this is the standard recollection. Itipiso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho. Yeah, and one of the things that come out when you read that whole sequence, one of the things that is interesting about that is that when the Buddha describes himself, he doesn't say anything about supernormal powers. He doesn't say anything about marvelous and kind of amazing things. All he talks about really in that whole sequence is the fact that he has insight into the nature of reality, and because of that, he is a teacher unsurpassed in the world. Yeah? This is how the Buddha say we should recall him. We should think about him as someone who has this insight into the nature of reality and understands the human mind. Yeah. So this is how the Buddha explains himself. Yeah, so that obviously then matters. All of these other things about supernormal powers or whatever, they are secondary if they are important at all. The Buddha discusses these supernormal powers in one place, and this is in the Kevada Sutta, in the 11th Sutta of the Long Discourses, the Digha Nikaya. And in there, there's a nice little story in there which talks about the Buddha is at Nalanda, Nalanda, the famous university later on. Yeah, if you go to India, you can see the ancient ruins of Nalanda. They're very impressive. At this time, Nalanda was just a village in India. And the Buddha is staying there, and this man who is one of the villagers, he goes to the Buddha and he says, Master, yeah, Sifu, is that right? Sifu, Master, yeah? Sifu, please tell your monks to do all kind of supernormal things, yeah? Tell them to fly through the air and all this kind of stuff, because then so many more people will gain confidence in the Dhamma. Is that right? Would you get would you get confidence in the Dhamma if you saw the Venerable Bhikkhuni here flying through the air, for example? Would you then kind of gain real confidence in the Bhikkhuni Sangha if that happened? It kind of would be cool, yeah. It would be, you got to admit it would be pretty cool if you saw someone flying through the air here, yeah, going through the ceiling and coming back down again, and whatever else you do, and kind of fire coming out of the body or whatever. It would be cool, but what the Buddha says to this man is very interesting. When this man says, please do supernormal powers because you will kind of gain so many more converts, the Buddha replies to him. He replies, I detest, I am disgusted by these supernormal powers. He uses the Pali word jiguchi, and jiguchi means literally you are disgusted by it. Yeah, that's what he says. And of course, when you know that is what the Buddha actually says about the supernormal powers, it is very unlikely that he will kind of talk about himself in that way, as that this being important, or that he will actually do supernormal powers in daily life. When you read the suttas, when you read the essence of what the Buddha is talking about, he almost never is there any mention of supernormal powers at all in the suttas. The only places you find things about supernormal powers is in the narratives. The narratives were often written down after the Buddha's teachings by other people. That's why the Mahaparinibbana Sutta is full of supernormal stuff. But this was written down by other people later on. The Buddha says specifically, I am disgusted by supernormal powers. Yeah, very, very, very interesting. Of course, if you did see supernormal powers, you say, "Whoa, wow, that's really amazing." But then what? Afterwards, after you think, maybe I was hallucinating, maybe I didn't see it properly. Can you please do it again? I want to see it again. And then it carries on like that forever, and it becomes more like a show. It becomes like entertainment, yeah. And that's really what it ends up as. But it doesn't really have any real effect on your own spiritual practice, because this is so important, because if you travel around the Buddhist world, there is so much talk about supernormal powers everywhere, and this monk having that supernormal powers, that monk having not so. I never heard of. I maybe occasionally also hear about nuns having supernormal powers, but not usually it is about monks, and this kind of ends being the faith and the confidence of people that they talk about these things, and that becomes like a show. It becomes like entertainment rather than having any real spiritual significance. The Buddha, when you talk about the Buddha, what matters is the wisdom faculty, is the ability to teach because you have insight into the nature of reality. And the supernormal powers, actually, they don't really have any teaching ability. They may be true, it may be possible to use these things, but in terms of actually, their ability to convince people or to have faith, actually they have very little value. And the Buddha says to this man, he says that, well, if I tell my monks to do these things, then what will happen is that those people who already have faith and confidence, they will say, wow, amazing, look at what these monks can do. But those who don't have any faith, they will dismiss it as saying it is some kind of magic trick. Yeah? And of course, a lot of these things, they can be precisely magic tricks. And modern magicians do exactly these kind of things as well. Yeah, it looks like they're flying through the air, but actually it is just an illusion. It's not no reality at all. So this is, I think, an important point to keep in mind when we look at the suttas, that they're more important and more profound things than these kind of shows of entertainments or whatever. So the Buddha here, the first thing that he says about himself, Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho, and Samma Sambuddho is already an interesting word in a sense, because the word Samma Sambuddha, the word Buddha, actually means awakened. Quite literally, it means awakening here. The verb bujjati means to wake up. So if you wake up in the morning, you bujjati, you wake up. And if you look at some of the Indo-European languages, because Pali and the Sanskrit are part of the Indo-European language group, all the European languages, not all of them, but most of them belong to that group. Persian belongs to that group. Many of them, not all, but most of the Indian languages belong to that group. It's a very large, perhaps the largest language group in the world. And some of those languages still have the word Buddha, and it means to wake up. Are you awake? Yes, I'm Buddha. So this is so it means like waking up. And of course, waking up has a very nice idea to it, because to wake up means that you're coming out of sleep. You're coming out of a dream. What is it like to be asleep? Well, it is deluding, yeah? When you are sleeping, you have all kinds of weird ideas. I'm sure all of you have had lots of dreams in your life, and dreams are really so weird sometimes, really unrealistic. You can do almost anything in a dream, yeah? And then you wake up, jeepers, what was going on? That was really strange. And it has no kind of correction to reality. So the idea of being awake has the idea of clarity, has the idea of coming out of a dream. It's almost as if our normal state right now is a little bit like a dream. It's not really the full reality. We're not seeing things clearly. Yeah, so it's about this clarity about things, seeing things as they actually are. This is what really matters in Buddhism. And of course, becoming awake also has another very important sense. When you sleep, it's usually in the darkness. That's when you sleep the best, when it's really dark. Yeah, and of course, the idea of awakening is like turning on the light. This is what the Buddha says specifically. He talks about light being turned on. Yeah, now you can see what you're doing. The rest of the time, it is as if we are stumbling around in the darkness. What happens when you're stumbling around in the darkness? What happens is that you hurt yourself. You hit yourself, you don't know where to put your feet, you don't know where to put your head. You knock your head against the rafter, you stumble, you hit your toes against something on the ground, yeah, and you hurt as a consequence. Being in the darkness all the time is problematic. You hurt yourself, and you cannot really, it's very hard to find the real happiness. Turn on the light, you know where to go, you know what you have to do. So light is always a symbol of wisdom in Buddhism, and it is part of this idea of waking up. This is what matters. This is what the Buddha is about. It's about this waking up from the slumber of life, not being realistic about it. And one of the most important things in Buddhism is precisely right view. Yeah, right view is at the very beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path. And right view is precisely about seeing things in the real way. Yeah, it's the opposite of being deluded, the opposite of being kind of not understanding what is going on. And this is what the Buddha starts off with. He tells us this is the nature of reality. Practice accordingly, and you too will see that as it actually is. So Samma Sambuddha, already a nice word, and the main meaning of that is the idea of waking up. Then we have the next one on this list, Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vijja Charana Sampanno. Sampanna, the last part, it means like you are endowed with, and what you are endowed with is Vijja and Charana, two words that you are both endowed with according to this. And Vijja means like insight, yeah, or understanding, or it is related to the English word wit. To be witty means to be funny, yeah. So of course, if you are a noble one, you have Hasapanya. We have a nun in Perth called Venerable Hasapanya. She's from Malaysia originally, yeah, and she is the abbot of Dhammasara, not Bodhinyana, Dhammasara monastery, and she has quite a lot of Hasapanya. She's a very, very happy nun actually. She's always laughing, always enjoying herself. So she's from Malaysia. She's from Ipoh, and Hasapanya is one of the qualities of someone who is an anagami. You have laughing wisdom. Is that kind of nice? Laughing wisdom, because you're happy. Yeah, this is part of this idea of vijja here, insight. You have all of these things become part of that. But vijja really, so that's why it is related to the English word wit. Yeah, you are witty. Wit also means you are sharp-minded, you are quick on your feet, you have ready wit. So it's actually related to all of these Indo-European words. But vijja in Pali, the main meaning of that is the te vijja. Yeah, the te vijja, the three insights, the three understandings, the three knowledges. And those three knowledges, the last one is probably the most important one. Actually, it is the most important one, because the last one of those three is the understanding or the insight into the Four Noble Truths. Yeah, that is the one that really matters there. And the Four Noble Truths are very interesting teachings, because again they bear on what is the very kind of nature of our existence, what human life is all about. And those Four Noble Truths, the very first one is of course the noble truth of suffering. Yeah, the dukkha arya satcha is the first one of those noble truths. And this is one of the insight of the Buddha, is to understand dukkha, understanding the suffering of existence. Now when you understand the suffering of existence, you also understand the opposite of that suffering. You also understand happiness. Because happiness and suffering are two opposite sides of the same coin. They always come together. So by fully understanding suffering, you also fully understand happiness. Both of these things come together. And when we talk about happiness in Buddhism, it doesn't just mean that you're kind of, running around laughing and enjoying yourself. What it means all those things in your life that have a positive impact on you. It means contentment. It means compassion. It means metta, friendliness to other people. It means a lack of defilements in the mind. It means peace. It means any kind of quality inside of you that is positive and actually enhances the quality of your life. And what is important about this is that so often in life we think, if you live an ordinary life, you think that happiness is to be found in one place. The vast majority of people, they run around looking for happiness, but they never actually found that thing that they really want. Every time you have a desire, every time you want to get somewhere in your life, every time you have something that you are looking for, a desire arises in you, you will notice how that desire, in a sense, promises you some kind of happiness. If you get this desire fulfilled, if you get into the right kind of relationship, if you get the right kind of career, it will be satisfying. Yeah, that is the feeling we have always, that these things will actually satisfy us. It will take away the craving and it will make us complete inside. But it never actually works out. Yeah, you know what I mean? Life always has this promise somehow in the future. Life is like a dream, the Buddha says elsewhere. We dream about the sense of completion, done through relationships, done through having the right kind of career, done by living that life in the right way, by maybe having the family in the right way, whatever it is. But actually, the satisfaction never really comes, and the craving and the state of mind doesn't really get where we want it to get. So then the Buddha comes along and he says, well, the reason why we are doing this is because we are going about the search in the wrong way. Yes, we want to be content, we want to be satisfied, but we are trying to make ourselves satisfied. Satisfaction is a mental state of mind. Feeling complete inside, feeling content is a mental thing. And we're trying to make that mental state of mind, to make it work out, to feel happy and content through external things. Relationships are external things. Having a successful career is an external thing. Having a good family is an external thing. Of course, all of these things matter. I'm not saying they don't matter, but they will never give you that inner sense of satisfaction, which is a psychological thing. If you want to change your inner psychology, you have to work on your mind. That is the only way you're going to be able to find that satisfaction. That thing, that very deep down, each one of us is yearning for, you can only find it by developing your mind in the right way, through morality, through meditation practice, and ultimately through wisdom. You cannot fill a psychological hole. You cannot fill a psychological gap inside of you through external things. It has to come from inside. That hole will always be there, and that is why craving always re-arises. You're always looking for new things in the future, and when you die, you're still not satisfied. So you still your mind is already looking for the future, and that's why you get reborn. That's why, and then you carry on. As soon as you get reborn, you start crying because you want something more. That's why babies cry. They cry because they're not really satisfied. There's something they want. They're hungry, or whatever it is. And so it goes on and goes on and goes on. We've been looking for this solution for so long already. We haven't found it. It is time to listen to the Buddha, because the Buddha promises us that there is a satisfaction to be found if we look in the right place. And of course, the Buddha is a path of mental development. Instead of trying to find that satisfaction and completion outside of us, instead we look within. We develop our mind, and we actually create that satisfaction, that contentment, that completion inside by changing our outlook, by living in such a way that the happiness comes from within instead. This is the promise of the Buddha. And if you keep on practicing that path, you start to feel more and more satisfied, more and more content with life. The less inner contentment you have, the more it relies on external things, the more problematic it is, because external things are so unreliable. The more you find those things inside of yourself, the more you become independent of the world, and you start to find the thing inside of you. So this is what the Buddha is promising us, and eventually leading to complete satisfaction if you practice this path all the way. And this is why I was saying before, the Buddha's path is the answer to the meaning of life. That thing which you're always looking for, which is satisfaction, which is contentment, cannot be found in the way that most people look for it in the world. It's impossible, because they're looking in the wrong place. The Buddha says you have to look within. You have to look in developing your mind, and it's possible to develop the mind. That is where you find it. And if you think about it carefully, it is so obvious that has to be the case. It is so absolutely clear. The more you think about it, the more obvious that becomes. So again, the Buddha's teaching is the answer to the question of the meaning of life, and that is why they are so powerful. The alternative is to carry on as before, searching and searching and searching endlessly, life after life, looking in the wrong place for happiness, looking in the wrong place for real satisfaction, and then you end up doing the same silly things again and again and again. We've all done that, and that's why we're still here. And I think you would be horrified if you saw your past lives. You would be horrified what was going on. You think, no, I'm crazy. I'm doing the same thing again and again and again. For goodness sake, get me out of here. That's what you would think, because it's just horrifying when you see you've been doing the same kind of mistake again and again and again, the same kind of suffering. No, enough. And this is where, of course, the idea of rebirth becomes such an important part of the Buddhist idea of a right outlook. So not only is it part of the idea of where to find real satisfaction, that whole idea of real satisfaction gains full meaning only in the context of rebirth itself. So this is what the Buddha wakes up to, this understanding of where real happiness is to be found. And this is why his message is so vital. This is why it is so fundamental to each one of us, because it actually points to what we're all really searching for at the end of the day. So that is one part of Vijja. The other part of the Vijja that the Buddha talks about, I just mentioned that already, is the idea of rebirth. Rebirth is such an incredibly significant part of the Buddha's teachings, and without that, the teaching loses its strength, it loses its real purpose. If you are going to die and then everything is finished, everything is fine, well, actually, there isn't such a big problem after all. It is in the context of rebirth that there is a real big problem. And then the third of these vijjas is the kamma, understanding and kamma really, one nice way, there's many nice ways of looking at kamma, but one of the nice ways of looking at it is at the mechanism that drives rebirth. The mechanism behind rebirth is what kamma really is about, how it occurs and how it works out. So that is the insight of the Buddha. He understands the meaning of life, and he understands that it's possible to achieve that meaning of life. And this is why it is such an extraordinarily vital and important teaching, and why it matters to all of us. And then you have the charana. The charana is the conduct, and this is another important part of this. So the Buddha is endowed with conduct and insight. And conduct, the point of that is that when you are changed, when you end your defilements, when you have an insight into reality, it affects how you are as a human being. Your conduct changes, you become different. And so when you see the Buddha, he is no longer what he was before. Before, he had defilements just like all of us. Afterwards, those are gone. And when the defilements are gone, your actions, the way you are as a human being, become different. And that is important, because what that means is that there are external signs for someone who is enlightened. It means that we have a chance to know whether someone has achieved something on the Buddhist path or not. We look at them and we see, do they have these defilements or not? It gives us some kind of way of being able to approach those people who have some kind of insight into reality. Of course, when it comes to the Buddha, we are left with a large degree of faith, and that faith and confidence, it arises very often by reading the suttas, reading the life of the Buddha, and then we see someone who obviously was very special just by reading that. But for contemporary teachers, it is allowable, it is important to look, to see, are they worthy of our faith and confidence or not? And you look for those qualities that you're supposed to have as someone who is highly developed. Do they have the qualities of metta and kindness? Have they overcome the defilements, or are they an angry person? If someone is an angry person, then you have good grounds for having a little bit of doubt. If someone has a lot of desires, like if someone has over 100 Rolls Royces, that was that famous Rajneesh, Osho, that famous kind of spiritual guru from India who set up in the United States. I think he had over 100 Rolls Royces, but he was so detached, he was no longer attached to detachment. That's what he said. That was his excuse for having 100 Rolls Royces. It was no longer attached to detachment. So in other words, check out my new Rolls Royce. That was okay. Really, sounds like a very kind of wise saying until you consider it carefully. You realize it's just a fraud, basically. So this is one of the things. We need to take some responsibility for our own practice and for where we place our own faith. And that is what you do by remembering that vijja and charana always go together. If someone has real insight, they also will affect their conduct. You cannot be an angry and grumpy old person and claim to be an arahant at the same time. It doesn't work like that. The reality just isn't like that. It doesn't mean that just because you are happy and you tell a lot of jokes that you're an arahant. Doesn't mean that either. It has to be some wisdom there as well. But generally speaking, a person who is kind of enlightened tends to be, the more enlightened you are, the more kind of light-hearted and easygoing, and the less of these defilements and problems you tend to have. So vijja charana going together. Then we have the idea of sugato. I'm not going to talk about these things in too much detail because that's not really what this is about. I just wanted to get some idea, a little bit of background idea about the Buddha and what he kind of is before we start the life story of the Buddha. Sugato means one who has gone to a good destination. So I kind of like to translate sugato just as the happy one. It's kind of a nice translation of. I don't think anyone else translates that. That's my kind of coining of sugato. Lokavidu means the one who knows the world. Loka is the world, in very much in the same way as in English we talk about the world. The loka means world in almost exactly the same way in Pali. And vidu, again, means someone who knows. It's related to vijja that we saw before. It's basically the same word as vijja. So what does it mean to know the world? And to know the world can be understood in many different ways. You can think of knowing the world as knowing the various levels of rebirth and all of that, and that is part of it. To know the Buddhist cosmology with all of these things, that is part of it. But really, the main idea of knowing the world again relates to knowing suffering and happiness. That's really what it means, because knowing the various levels of rebirth, what's the point of that? Well, the point of that is to understand what the potential rebirths we have in this universe, what they are. You can be reborn in very happy places, So that is the kind of happiness that you may have waiting for you if you live your life well. Or you can be reborn in places of suffering. Like becoming an animal in your next life. That is often a lot of suffering, especially if you get reborn as a cockroach or something like that. That's really a lot of suffering. And people run after you, trying to kill you all the time. Imagine the suffering. You're just a little cockroach, a tiny little creature, and you're always scared because people are running after you, trying to kill you because they think you are. People are afraid of you. What do you think that little cockroach is of people? That's much, much worse. So it's kind of silly that we are afraid of cockroaches, because they are so afraid of us. And when you think of it like that, have compassion on the cockroaches in your life. To catch them instead of killing them, put them in a little box, throw them outside, and then you are doing a little service for that poor cockroach whose life is already so short and so much suffering. And then we're actually doing something beautiful. I went to a funeral service just before I came here to KL, and there was this man who had died, and he was originally from Europe, from Belgium in Europe, and he had come to Australia 40, 50 years ago. We were working in Australia, and he had become a Buddhist, and he was always looking after the little insects, never killing anything. That was kind of part of his Buddhist practice. And I thought, what a nice thing that is, that we don't kill beings. Everyone wants to live. Everyone is afraid of death and suffering. Whenever you kill somebody, you are, in a sense, giving them things they don't really want to have. You're giving them suffering when they don't want to do so. And this is why keeping these 5 precepts is so useful and so important to do. So I'm getting a bit carried away now, but the idea of different levels of rebirths, you have to really, the point here is that the Buddha understands all the potential for suffering and happiness in the world. And the only way you can be fully enlightened, fully awakened, is if you understand the full potential for happiness and suffering. And that is what the Buddha understands, and he understands that none of that is actually permanent, none of that is something that you can hold on to. All of it is ultimately unsatisfactory, ultimately problematic. Again, this is part of understanding where can we find final meaning, real meaning, and so to find some final satisfaction in life. So that is the Loka Vidu. Then we have the Anuttaro Purisadhamma Sarati. And this is the idea of being the supreme teachers of human beings. Purisa Dhamma. Dhamma means like tameable. So the supreme teacher of tameable people. And of course, the idea here is that if you have the full insight into the nature of reality, if you understand how reality works, if you understand where happiness is to be found, if you understand the path that leads to that happiness, all of that is part of the insight of the Buddha. If you understand that, if you understand the meaning of life, then of course you become the supreme teacher. And you are able to teach others as a consequence. And so that is what that is about. And one way of thinking about the Buddha is precisely in terms of these 2 qualities. First of all, the one who has the full insight into the nature of human existence. And the other one, because he does have that insight, that understanding, he also has compassion for people. He has compassion because he knows that most people, even though they want happiness, they don't really know where to find it. He has found that happiness. He knows where it is to be found. So he knows he has something to give to humanity. He has the highest gift. No gift is higher. If you can give people the very meaning of life, then obviously you have given them the highest gift that is possible. So the Buddha has compassion for people, and he has the insight that is required. And this is why he becomes the kind of highest teacher. And part of this, one of the nice things about the Buddha, is to remember that the Buddha, when he teaches us, he would probably rather not have to teach us. For the Buddha, it is far better just to kind of hang out and practice the jhanas and practice the deep samadhi. To go and live in the cave by himself. That's probably what he would want to do. In fact, sometimes he does do that, and he says afterwards he doesn't really want to talk to anyone. He wants to dismiss them because it's just so much problems compared to sitting by yourself in the cave and blissing out. So for the Buddha, actually, he doesn't really want to teach. He does it only because of compassion. He doesn't have any vested interest. The Buddha is not really interested in disciples. Disciples is a hassle. The more disciples you have, oh no, it's just a headache. Because then they come to you and they want to talk to you, and they have problems. And so for me, it's not such a big problem because I haven't really got many disciples. But for the Buddha, imagine, the headache having so many disciples. Ajahn Brahmali also sometimes, so many disciples. And everybody wants to kind of talk to you, and they want to have some, they want to have some interaction with you. When all you want to do is go back to your cave, and just relax and enter some blissful states or whatever. That's what you want if your practice is together. So the Buddha doesn't have any interest in teaching. He doesn't have any vested interest. He doesn't get anything out of it. All he gets out of it is trouble. So when he teaches, it comes from a very pure place. The majority of teachers in the world, when they teach for a reason very often, either to make a living or to gain disciples because your ego gets flattered by having many students or whatever it is. Most people, they have some kind of vested interest in being a teacher. But the Buddha has no vested interest. He has a negative vested interest. For him, actually, it is a hassle. And what is good about that, once you get that idea, is that when you read the suttas, the Buddha doesn't say the suttas to flatter anybody. He doesn't say these things because he feels any pressure to say things in one way or the other. He says it for only one reason, because he wants to help people out of suffering and move them towards more happiness and to find the real meaning of life. That is the only reason why he teaches. And again, this is one of those things that when you read the suttas, when you realize that, you take them far more seriously. Comes from an enlightened person who has no vested interest, and it kind of makes you think about every word carefully here. And if you cannot accept it because you find it is too difficult to understand or whatever, instead of rejecting it straight away, you put it to one side. Say, okay, I can't accept this now, but maybe later on I can come back to this and make it something more. Maybe it will become more useful to me here. So this is why the Buddha is the unsurpassed teacher. Full insight, full compassion combined, no vested interest. That is why he is so special. So, what else do we have here? And then we have Satta Deva Manusanang. He is the teacher of gods and humans. He is the Buddha. He is the Bhagava. Teacher of gods and humans, again, I don't need to get too much into that. It just means that the Buddha has, again, the highest wisdom. The gods don't teach the Buddha. It's the Buddha who teaches the gods. The gods are often inferior in that sense to the Buddha, in the sense that they don't have that wisdom that the Buddha has. So this is how we are supposed to remember the Buddha. He's the wisest person. He has full insight, and he is also the best possible teacher. And this is really what comes out of this particular refrain. So whenever you chant Iti Piso, remember what it means. Don't become like a parrot. Too many Buddhist parrots in this world. We do the chanting, everybody chants together, nobody knows what's going on, but we chant anyway, just for the sake of it. And it's okay, sometimes you can do that, because chanting can be nice, it can touch your heart a little bit, and you feel better about it, and that is fine. A little bit of rituals is useful in Buddhism. When we come down, we bow down to the Buddha, for example, or we do little things like that, and they can be nice, because there can be a heart quality in that, which is beautiful. But also, remember that the main purpose of these things is the meaning, and the meaning gives even more heart quality. It gives even more joy when you understand what is going on. So remember here what the Buddha really is about. Yeah, remember that you have the wisest person probably. This is what comes out of this. The wisest person in human history as your teacher. Your personal teacher. Yeah, he is, in many ways, he is your personal teacher because you can listen to him now. This is what we're doing now. He is your teacher. The wisest person in human history here is there to guide you. What an amazing thing that is to have a teacher like that. And this is one of the reasons why, instead of saying, who is your teacher, instead of replying, Ajahn so-and-so, or Ayah so-and-so, or Master so-and-so, or Sifu so-and-so, or Sayadaw so-and-so, or Lama so-and-so. No, say the Buddha is your teacher, because he is the one where you know that there is the real wisdom has to be. Why? Because all of Buddhism is based on the teaching of the Buddha. Everything else is meaningless unless the Buddha had it right. Everything else collapses. So we have to assume that the Buddha knew what he was talking about. This is where the real teachings are. So take the Buddha as your primary teacher. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to anyone else. Of course you have to. You need to listen to other teachers as well because they help you to understand and to explain. But come back to the word of the Buddha. The Buddha is the greatest spiritual genius in human history. What a wonderful thing it is to be able to take someone like that as your teacher. That is what becomes especially powerful. So that is the expression of the word of the Buddha. So please, when you do these little rituals and things, remember the meanings of these things, because the meanings actually is extraordinarily powerful. This is how the Buddha himself asks that we should remember him. Yeah, this is what the Buddha says. This is actually the word of the Buddha I'm reading out now. The Buddha says, when you remember me, please remember me like this. So this is the first reason why I want to talk about the life of the Buddha, to get some more understanding of the Buddha. Who was he as a person? And when you get more feeling for the Buddha as a person, you tend to get more confidence and faith as a consequence. If the Buddha is too distant, if he's too far away, it is too difficult to relate to him. It makes it much more hard to have real confidence and faith. Yeah, it is like, it's like in life now, whatever teacher you have now, say someone like Ajahn Brahmali. Ajahn Brahmali has been coming to Malaysia for over 20 years teaching. Yeah, and one of the reasons why, especially people at the BGF, why presumably you have some confidence in Ajahn Brahm is because you know him quite well. Yeah, you've been seeing him coming for 20 years, and you see that there has been some stability there, some continuity. The good qualities are there to be seen. You can see that they haven't changed all that much. If anything, maybe getting better. And because of that, after a while, you start to feel a sense of trust that this is a real deal. Yeah, this is not some kind of fake monk, yeah, who has jeans under the robes, yeah, like you see sometimes in these video YouTubes. Actually, Ajahn Brahm probably doesn't. Have you checked if Ajahn Brahm has jeans under his? He hasn't got that, right? You know that straight away. Yeah? And that is what the confidence you feel after knowing someone for a long time. And it's the same with the Buddha. The more we read about his life story, the more feeling you get for him as a person, the more confidence you start to get, and the more easy it is to relate to him. Yeah. So that is one of the reasons why I'm going to look at all of these autobiographical suttas and biographical suttas that describe him, so that we can actually get more out of the Iti Piso chant. So that when you talk about the Buddha, when you chant about him, you feel that connection much more. And that makes the suttas come alive. It makes the teaching come alive. Everything comes alive the closer your connection is with the Buddha. So this is the first purpose of this, and this is why I started off with this usual verse that we do. But the second reason why the life of the Buddha is so interesting is because so many of the teachings in the suttas are biographical suttas or autobiographical suttas, where the Buddha talks about his own practice. Yeah, and there are a large number of this found in, for example, the Majjhima Nikaya. You have the Bhaya-bhairava Sutta, fear and dread, which is the Majjhima Nikaya number 4. You have the Dveda Vitakka Sutta, the two kinds of thought, which is Majjhima Nikaya number 19. You have the Upakilesa Sutta. You have Majjhima Nikaya, all the suttas about where the Buddha talks about his practices in a more general sense, Majjhima 26, 36, 85, 100. So I think we're talking about maybe 10, somewhere between 10 and 20 suttas in the Majjhima where the Buddha talks about his own practice and his own life. There's a lot. So the question is, why does the Buddha do that? And of course, the reason why he does that, as I mentioned before already, is because he wants to say, this is what I did. You should be doing the same thing. You should be practicing in the same way. So so it should be inspiring to us to read how the Buddha practiced and say, well, we should try to follow in his footsteps and actually try to give rise to the same kind of things. And this is another reason why these autobiographical suttas are often so interesting, and they give details very often that you do not actually find anywhere else. And this is part and parcel for why it becomes powerful. So that, again, is just a little bit by way of background and the reason why I've chosen to focus on the life of the Buddha. And I think now let us have another little break, and then we can actually start to get into these suttas. We're spending 2 sessions already just getting prepared, and now we can actually start getting into it. So let's have another break, and let's maybe meet back here again at around 10:40.